Hey guys, Paul here. Gonna try something new starting today. I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm gonna do a weekly podcast, and this is gonna be for my Patreon supporters. I'm sticking this first one up on YouTube, just sort of get the idea out there. And yeah, I'm doing this for a variety of reasons. One, I do the regular videos and I love them. I'm going to continue doing them for as long as I'm able to. It's just something I've really learned to love doing, but they are really structured. I've got to write a script and rewrite it and edit and then shoot it and work in it in post-production and all that stuff to get it up and uploaded to you. And I really appreciate this. Is a great opportunity to thank you guys for the incredible response to a lot of the work I've done. It's been very supportive for the most part. There's a few people who don't like it, but I probably wouldn't be saying anything meaningful if I wasn't pissing somebody off. But you guys have been really great, and I really appreciate it. But this I'm sort of approaching for a lot of different reasons. One of them is sort of like Terrence Popp does. He produces videos that are like therapy for him. And this is sort of a stab at that for myself, something a little bit therapeutic, I would say, a little bit of opportunity to vent, talk some occasional shit, and say some things that I probably won't say in my videos. And I guess that there's probably some of you out there scratching your head, given what I do say in some of my videos, trying to figure out what the fuck I would say here that I wouldn't say in my videos. And, well, there is some stuff. But this gives me an opportunity to do that. It also gives me an opportunity to hopefully provide a little entertainment, a little way to pass some time for my Patreon supporters. It's going to be available, by the way, to all of them. Like if you pledge $1 per video to my Patreon and you cap it at one video, that's $1 per month, then you get access to these weekly podcasts that you can, listen to in your car on the way to work Monday morning or whatever. This one's going out a little early, but I'm typically going to release them late Sunday night, so everybody has a chance to download them and get them ready for work in the morning, or wherever else they may want to listen to it. I don't know how long I'm going to talk. I don't know everything I'm going to talk about. I know I'm going to probably address some topical stuff. I'm going to start this one off with telling you a little bit more about myself, a little bit more about my experience in the men's movement. I'm going to talk shit about a couple of people. That's fine. I know it may bother some people, but that's okay. So I'll warn you now, if you don't like criticizing some sacred cows, then this is probably not a good place to be, but I will try to keep it as civil as possible while still being honest. Excuse me while I put another nicotine lozenge in my mouth. Jesus fucking Christ. I smoked for 35 years, quit 6 years ago, been addicted to nicotine lozenges ever since, which I guess is a lot better than smoking for sure. But goddamn, these things are expensive too. I mean, they're going to get you one way or another. And I know I could just quit whining and quit the lozenges, but I'm probably not going to do that anytime soon. So anyways, that's the point. Doing a little bit of self-therapy here, talking about topical events, stuff like the Red Pill movie, and starting off to introduce you a little bit, if you don't know anything about me, or even if you think you know a lot about me, is, how did I get to this place in life? I mean, who the fuck does what I do anyway? Who would want to? I don't even know why I want to half the time. But I'm going to do my best to explain it. And I guess the best place to start is just a little bit of history about me. I grew up in a very traditional family. I would call it abusively traditional, very strict. What would certainly be, by any stretch, be called an abusive family by today's standards. And it produced me as quite the rebel, in case you hadn't guessed. Like, if you don't know anything about me at all, you're probably going to know that by now. But I was just sort of going through life, being a rebel about all the wrong things. Ended up working in the counseling field, trying to help people and trying to, like all counselors, spending the first few years trying to sort out my real shit. thinking I was helping people. The good ones, by the way, a good way to tell is the people that have finally figured out the difference between themselves and their clients. That's a long story I'll get into at some other time. But I walked around knowing, that there was just something wrong. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew that I had the same experiences with women that most guys like me did. I was straight up blue pill, go buy flowers, tell women really complimentary things, flatter the shit out of them, try to please them, try to make them laugh, try to make them smile, especially with my wallet. I went through that whole thing for years, and I knew in my mind that there was something wrong about it. But every time I tried to think about what's wrong with this picture, then I would have to stop thinking about what's wrong with this picture, because when you really think about it, treating women like your betters, kissing ass and groveling to try to get their attention will put the fear of Jesus into you about not getting any more pussy. And you certainly, when you're 21, you can't think about if you're a straight guy, you can't think about not getting pussy. It's just absolutely out of the question. Well, maybe that's changing a little bit these days. I notice there's a lot more younger men that are getting into that. But in my time, that was just, you just did what it took to please women, starting with your mom, but that extended to all women. And I knew there was something wrong about that stuff. And then later on as a counselor, I started noticing stuff. But, I just couldn't quite put my finger on what the fuck was wrong. I knew something was wrong. I knew that things seemed shitty, but I didn't even know enough, and I had enough denial that I couldn't even articulate or form the right questions to approach what was wrong. I just had this sort of aggravating shit going on in the back of my mind all the time about this is kind of fucked up and that's kind of fucked up, but I really didn't know what to do, if anything, about it. And then one day in 93, someone told me, hey, you heard about this book? It's called The Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell. I thought, wow, that's a pretty intriguing title. I think I'll go check it out. And I started reading, and I don't think I slept until I finished the book. And it was like, wow, this is the shit. This was like what was bothering me the whole time. And it came with kind of a blessing, which meant that, all right, okay, I haven't been crazy. I've been looking around at all this shit all my life and knowing something was wrong. And that sort of satisfied that, and I didn't feel so crazy. But then after reading that book, I noticed a whole lot more shit was wrong. So much, it was just stupefying. I noticed it in my work as a counselor. I noticed it in all my social interactions. I noticed it in my male friendships, watching them run around, kiss women's asses, and watching myself continue to do it, even after reading that book, because I really didn't know how to get out of that loop. That rut that you get into with gynocentrism. It's a hard thing to extract yourself from. But I did start getting more vocal about the problems. And of course, that's where the seed was planted, was in that book. And that's where the revolutionary in me sprouted. I ended up in all kinds of hot water at work, questioning everything, asking people all those uncomfortable questions that none of us wants to answer. Some of it was shit like, why is it that when we admit men to this facility, we, check real hard into whether or not they've been abusive with their wives. But when we admit women, we only ask them if they've been abuse victims. And the research says otherwise. The research says we should be asking everybody. And of course, just asking that question, as I've gone into this in one of the other more structured videos I did, just asking that question pissed people off and pissed them off to no end. The anger from that was just explosive. So here I had this problem. I had this newfound knowledge, and I was noticing more around me all the time of misandry and the feminist bullshit and the gynocentric bullshit. Just became like felt like I was walking through a war zone of all this scattered debris of false beliefs around me all the time, talking about it, pissing people off, but really not knowing what to do with it. And this was 93. This is before the internet was really a thing. I mean, I know it had been invented at that point, but it wasn't this powerful mass media apparatus that it is now. So at some point, I thought about the internet and said, hey, man, there's a good way to get some ideas out. It was like, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. I got the domain of voiceformen.com. And I thought, okay, well, I'll build a website and I'll start writing about this stuff and everybody will pay attention to it. And boy, was I wrong. The internet wasn't ready. I was ready. I had a lot to say, but the internet just hadn't developed to the point that it's anything like it is now. And so I backed off of it. I satisfied myself with just writing letters to editors and watching 90% of them not be published and watching the other 10% maybe get published in newspapers and such with some remark from the editor about what an idiot I was. And I sort of gave up on it, just did what I could do. And then when I figured out the internet was ready to handle it, I went back into my writing, and I started out of all places at a place called classmates.com, where you go in there and talk with people you went to high school with and what have you, and other people. There's other groups in there. And I just started writing down my ideas and just testing the waters to see how much it pissed people off. And I found out, man, it really pissed people off. It was like, you think feminists are mad at MRAs now? When you get an audience and a culture that's never even heard of this shit, because nobody, I mean, I'd read Myth of Male Power. There's maybe a handful of people on the planet comparatively that had read it, but nobody heard anybody defending men. It was something that just didn't happen. And when I started doing it to a crowd that had never been exposed to that or never even heard of it happening, the reaction was like I had, I don't know, 500 big reds on my hand. Well, it wasn't 500, much smaller venues. But I had a lot of big reds on my hand, and they were all, I mean, men, women, whatever, gay, straight, all of them were just fucking nuts over this stuff. And so I thought, okay, somebody popped up and agreed with me and said one time, if you're getting a lot of flack, you're over the target. And I sort of took that to heart, and I kept writing. I went on to writing forums and put my stuff out there. And of course, instead of getting critique on my writing, which is sort of what writing forums are for, I got told I was a lunatic and a hater. And matter of fact, I got called a misogynist so many times that I ended up, when I finally started taking my stuff to YouTube, calling myself the happy misogynist. It was just sort of a tongue-in-cheek play on the happy hooker. I got called a misogynist so much for defending men that I figured I'd just go ahead and give it to him, call myself the happy misogynist, and thought it was really nice and catchy, and did that on YouTube. And then, Bernard Chapin was around at that time, which he still is, and doing stuff sort of on this topic. Men's News Daily was out there, the big publication, which was friendly for men's rights issues, relatively friendly. Only if you went so far, you could have a problem there, as I'll get into here in a minute. And there was Angry Harry, which was really robust and growing at the time, and still miss you there, Harry. So I started trying to get my stuff out there. I made some YouTube videos, some montage shit, just slap some pictures together with, read a script into a shitty microphone, stick it out there, and got some traffic, and a lot of people telling me I needed to get my act together on the equipment, and they were right. I did. And so one day after I picked up a few subscribers and stuff, I wrote to Bernard Chapin, and he was the managing editor of Men's News Daily at the time, and said, hey, man, I got some stuff here. How about running it over there? And that was, somebody else had suggested that I do that, so I did it. And Bernard wrote me back and said, no way, man. You call yourself the happy misogynist, and his exact words, and I'm quoting him here, was, that's semantic quicksand. Nobody wants to get near anybody calling themselves a misogynist. There's no way. So, don't bother me with this. Well, he didn't actually say don't bother me with this, but that was sort of like the tone of the email. So I said, okay, and I went on about, I was writing stuff at antimisandry.com and a couple of other places, and one day, Mike LaSalle, the publisher of Men's News Daily, writes me, says, "Hey, man, I just found one of your videos that led me to your website. That's some great stuff. Why don't you come over here and write on Men's News Daily?" I wrote it back and I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to, but I'll let you know. I talked to your managing editor and he pretty much told me to go fuck myself instead of coming there." And Mike was all cool about it. He said, "Nah, fuck that. Come on. We'd love to run your material." So I was really happy. It was like a big moment. Men's News Daily was a big deal. And I was really happy to see my stuff there. And I wrote for a while. It ended up taking over as editor-in-chief. And that's when more trouble started, this is really, if you're interested in the history of what's happened online, this may seem like boring shit to 99.9% of people, but this is my story. And it's in part the story of the men's rights movement online as it came to be. But I noticed at Men's News Daily that it had its roots. Mike started that to be competition for the Drudge Report. Mike LaSalle, by the way, not saying anything bad about Mike, great guy, really brilliant guy, very even-handed, good manager, nothing but kudos to that guy for everything he's done. But Men's News Daily was, by all looks and means, a really typically traditional conservative publication, which the more I read into it, the other writers there, the more I saw guys, like in a competition to return to some imagined fucking days of glory for men. It was sort of like, that's the image I get when I think of Return of Kings. Like, what a dumb fucking name for a website. Like men were kings. Yes, like a man was king. One man of an entire country of men that were fucking vassals and serfs. But this imaginary fantasy of men returning to days when they were powerful and rode tall in the saddle and ran the world that never fucking existed because they were too busy digging fucking coal out of the ground and dying in wars. They weren't kings. Some guys, maybe they're fucking crazy enough to think that makes you a king. Not in my book. So I started looking around at all this and thought, you know what? This is not, when I thought back about, Warren Farrell's writings about male disposability, and he kept harping on that in the myth of male power, men and disposability, and the fact that we view men as this utilitarian object that we can use up and throw away. And then if you're lucky, we'll build a statue and put your name on it after you're fucking dead, right? Like that's a reward. And that's what I saw a lot of the men's movement online at that time. It was a bunch of traditional conservatives. And let me get something straight here about tradcons. I don't have anything against tradcons at all. Nothing in the world. As a matter of fact, I'll use an example. I'll give a shout out to Al Martin. Al Martin is a traditional man, and he is a conservative. So I guess, therefore, that makes him a tradcon. He is also somebody who understands and appreciates MGTOW. He's somebody who understands and appreciates the men's rights movement. He understands and appreciates men's choice and compassion for men. Tradcons, to me, are not the problem. Autocratic tradcons, on the other hand, fuckers that want to be in charge, that want to tell you how to be a man, to tell you to man up, and you guys know you're out there. Now, these fuckers can just suck it. And I saw a whole zoo full of them at Men's News Daily, including guys like David Usher. And I'll get into some of that in a minute. But anyway, I started thinking, well, what am I going to do here? I'd been at Men's News Daily for, 7 or 8 months. I was only there a total of a year before I left. But I thought, I'd noticed that I was starting to hold back some in my writing, that I was trying to make myself fit there. And that bothered me. And as soon as I sort of woke up to that, I really started noticing, hey, man, you got something to say, you better start saying it. And I did. And, of course, it pissed a lot of people off and sent some people away from Men's News Daily. I wrote my first sort of entrance into that. I'm going to start fucking with gynocentrists and tradcons, or rather autocratic tradcons, was that I wrote an article called something about gay marriage with a question mark, how about no marriage? And talked about how autocratic tradcons had treated marriage with all the sanctity of a $2 hooker, because that's what they had done. They'd let the family court system fall to shit, get taken over by ideologues, done absolutely nothing about it, and they were still sitting around Men's News Daily crowing about going back to days when men were great and blah, 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 and other bullshit, and I just, got sick of it. So I started writing about that. It pissed a lot of people off, but Mike, to his credit, Mike LaSalle was supportive, told me keep writing, keep saying, shake them up, do it. Really great guy. Still appreciate him after all these years. But after about a year, I really figured, you know what? For me, if there was going to be a men's movement, it would have to be different than a bunch of guys on white horses trying to be white knights, trying to be, 1950s America idea of what men ought to be. And so I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to go do so. I reacquired A Voice for Men, started a website there. I had the happymisogynist.com going, changed that to A Voice for Men, and started getting more serious about my writing. And sure enough, I found out, and I don't get to say this all the time in life, but I found out this time that I was right. There was a lot of guys out there that were ready for a men's rights message, something to do with men's rights, that didn't want anything to do with autocratic tradcons. And I'm not talking about appealing to the left. And somebody's going to say, yeah, you are. No, I'm fucking not. I'm just talking about appealing to men generally to look at the way that they're treated disposably, to look at all the evidence of misandry, not just the feminist-inspired, not just that in family courts, but the social contract between men and women, the lack of compassion for boys, and the way that translates even into the gay community. I mean, one of the first things I did after I launched A Voice for Men and got away from MND was to write an article. I think I titled it A Voice for Gay Men, making an appeal for gay men to show up and start writing about their experiences with misandry. And sure enough, they did. And some of them have turned out to be some of the most incredible writers and orators of these issues that you can possibly imagine, because you know what? Gay guys experience this shit too. They can get falsely accused of sexual harassment. They go through a lot of the same shit and the same pressures and then some as straight guys. But I don't do identity politics. I just thought that in a real men's movement, if I can use the word real, that it would include all men, that I don't give a fuck. Gay, straight, black, white, just doesn't matter. And that, I got to say, I turned out to be right about, because sure enough, with a lot of the readership of places like Men's News Daily, it pissed those guys off. They didn't want to have an inclusive, and it was, it was evident in the responses I got. But it also ignited a spark in an audience that has come to grow into something else. And you got to wonder, I mean, how did I end up here now, 8 years later, 8 years after I started doing this online? And now there's a Red Pill movie out, which is largely, it's predominantly about the work AVFM has done. It focuses on us throughout the movie. It concludes with us in the movie. And A Voice for Men, at least according to the media, is the go-to target for criticizing the men's movement, for explaining it, defining it, giving examples of it. You see my name, you see A Voice for Men everywhere. And A Voice for Men is a hell of a lot more than just me. I mean, there's a whole lot of great people at that website. And I think it was because we tapped into the anti-gynocentrism. I think that was men's problem all along. I still think that gynocentrism is the problem for men. And it's something that is like really fucking difficult to do anything about. It's really just crazy. Oh, and I didn't want to forget to do this. I said I was going to talk shit about somebody. I talked a little bit about Bernard, but me and Bernard have gone back and forth a lot of times. I don't have any real hostility toward Bernard. I think he's foolish and misguided sometimes, but he thinks the same about me, and that's perfectly fine with me. David Usher is a different story. When I was at Men's News Daily, David Usher published an article basically going after gay guys for being gay. I mean, he wasn't just attacking identity politics or victim politics, which I happily do myself. I don't want to hear any identity politics or victim politics out of gays as a group or anybody, really. I don't think this is about victimhood. But he wrote an article just bashing on gays, and Google contacted Mike LaSalle and said, we're not going to have this. Your AdSense is in jeopardy if you publish this kind of content. And Mike thought it over and said, let's pull this thing. Let's get rid of it. Hate to do it, but, he didn't want to lose all of his income. And he asked me to pull it, so I did. And David Usher fulminated like a 2-year-old bitch child. He went fucking nuts. He gathered all he had, because he had a lot of access. He had all the email addresses of everyone, I think, who ever wrote for AVFM, and he started sending out these block emails saying that Paul Elam was a feminist plant. He knew better than to go after Mike. I was fresher meat, so and a much more of an unknown quantity. So he blamed the whole thing on me. It wasn't even my choice to pull the article. But he told everybody that wrote there to quit writing for Men's News Daily as long as I was there, because I was a feminist plant. And he said I was a seasoned fighter pilot there to disrupt and derail the men's movement. And this was a drama that went on for like fucking months, man, before I ever got this idiot out of my system. And these were the kind of guys that I really thought that the men's rights movement, if it was ever going to congeal into some sort of formidable force, that you're going to have to leave guys like that behind. And still, I may be wrong. I mean, somebody can go out there and prove me wrong any day, but I still believe that. The guys like that, these snakes in the grass, and believe me, there's plenty of them. And there's some I won't talk about because there's no point in it. But this movement has snakes in the grass, just like anybody else. And in our case, David Usher was one of them at the time. I haven't heard much from him in a long time, which is really good. And I should have had a cue. David wrote me when I first came, welcoming me to MND, thinking my material was great, and said that I would really want to get to know him because he was one of the movers and shakers in the men's movement. This is his words. This is what he said to me. And my bullshit detector went off then. I mean, anybody that's going to call themselves a movement mover and shaker, I don't even like the label of leader. I get called that, and I have shunned it for 8 fucking years for a reason. Why? Because leaders are fucking targets, and if a movement depends on one person, then it's fucked anyways. And of course, this movement is not dependent on me or any one person. But David Usher, anyway, he was a clown. He was part of the whole departure thing from Men's News Daily, and that sort of brought me to the birth of A Voice for Men. And a lot of you know the story from there. The tactic I chose at A Voice for Men was based on reasoning. And this is where I get to say another sort of I told you so. And it's not, look, guys, it's not like I have tons of I told you so's. I don't. And I've made plenty of mistakes in the last 8 years. I've made some that I regret a lot, some that I regret a little, and some that I probably don't even know that I've made yet. But I know I've made plenty of mistakes. But the tack I took was not one of them, and it's been validated. I've had people for 8 years filling my email box and the comments on YouTube and the comments at A Voice for Men and messages and comments on Facebook and everywhere else in social media and tweets from hell and other people that call themselves MRAs telling me to tone it down. I mean, the tone police are fucking everywhere. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I mean, these guys are fucking retarded. It's like they don't understand anything about history at all, about any social movement. I mean, name me one social movement. Shit, it is fortunate as hell that we have a movement that didn't start with violence, because that's how most movements start. They start with burning buildings and people dying and people being shot and riot police and German shepherds and water cannons. That's how most human rights movement starts. And feminism was not an exception. If you go back and look at the suffragettes and their history of violence and arson and all kinds of chaos, I ran across some bitch from England named Elam, for fuck's sake. Just how embarrassing is that? That was in Her Majesty's Prison Holloway 3 times for terrorism. She was a feminist radical. Violence has marked the gay rights movement started with the Stonewall riots. Every social movement you can think of has involved violence, except the men's rights movement. There has been some violence and threats of violence, but it's been toward us, not coming from us. What we have done instead is let off the steam with provocative literature and with just getting in the face and getting rude and getting crude with these agents of fucking hate that we call feminists. And yes, even some of the autocratic tradcons who are telling us to man up, dumb fucks like Tucker Carlson, Dennis Prager, and that lot. And the only way, I studied this stuff. I looked back to all the way in history, and I looked at what happened with Warren Farrell. The Myth of Male Power is the most brilliant articulation, well-documented, substantial treatise on men's issues that has ever been written. It is absolutely brilliant. It is absolutely on point. It is methodically researched and well stated. And he's, as Warren recently said at a Berkeley screening of the Red Pill movie, it got men's issues nowhere. And he acknowledged that he and I had that conversation. As a matter of fact, I might edit this and insert that in there. Matter of fact, here it comes.
What do you say to people who say that you tamed down the more extreme name-calling, misogynist aspects of men's rights activism in this film?
That's a question for me, yes?
Sure.
Well, as far as taming down, I don't think I tamed down. I did give it attention in the beginning to show what the mass media says about the men's rights movement, and near the end I tried to explain that what I was seeing as these cherry-picked quotes from the men's rights movement in mainstream media all had actually a lot of valid intent behind those quotes that were cherry-picked. Mm-hmm. I tried to use the Bash a Violent Bitch article as one example of something that was quoted and reposted a lot and actually had more to it than just that quote taken out of context with the Jezebel article. And so a lot of the cherry-picked quotes that I find in the Voice for Men and a lot of the men's rights movement has similar explanations for those quotes. And if you're willing to dig a little deeper or read the whole article or find the intent behind the words, then it's a good conversation to have. And to a Voice for Men's credit, their shocking headlines led me down the rabbit hole. So, we could criticize their tactics, but it worked on me. So, and it actually led me to learn about all these very important issues.
I actually agree with you, but I've wandered into the red pill swamp once or twice on Reddit, mm-hmm. and there's real live woman hating on that thing.
Yeah, and that is a completely different community than the men's rights movement. Yeah.
I had a lot of trouble with some of the stuff that came out of that was on the Voice for Men site, which is the core, men's rights site. And I talked with Paul about that, and he said, "Listen, Warren, you put out in the Myth of Male Power every single rational argument and based it with, backed it up with all this data and stuff like that. And where did it get you? Where did it get not you, but where did it get men's issues? Nowhere." And he said, I decided to take the risk of exaggerating, saying things that were sort of like out of place, misogynist, and get attention first, and then move people through that attention into some more rational arguments and more caring arguments. Now that's a political decision and it's a personal decision and it's not a decision that's in my personality to make. But it is a decision that I've seen is, it's had a very powerful impact, as in, the creation of this movie, but also getting many people to see that there's something that's going on that boys and men are saying, or that at least men are saying, that has a value. And one of the things that, even when I significantly disagree with a man, I'd rather have a voice for men be heard, rather than that voice for men be repressed, become a volcano, and lead to somebody killing somebody because they never had an ear for what they were saying.
Now, first of all, big tip of the hat, and thank you to Warren for acknowledging that. That was, quite a statement. But he's really acknowledging what needed to happen here. And he was saying that wasn't his personality. I get that. I mean, I respect the hell out of Warren and a lot of other men's rights activists who won't take that tack. But if this movement was going to get anywhere, it was going to have to make room for men's anger. It was going to have to make room for guys that had had the shit beat out of them, who had had their kids taken away, who had had their lives bloodied, who had been falsely imprisoned, who had been robbed of everything and stabbed in the back by their own fucking families. It was going to have to make room for their anger. And it just so happened that I happened to be the personality of a kind at the right time in the right place that was willing to make room for that anger. And guys, it was the right call. It was the right thing to do. And hopefully now things will tone down a little. Not quite there yet. But it does provide us an opportunity, particularly with the work of Cassie J, the Red Pill movie, that we're going to move on and hopefully have more productive, more civil discussions in an environment where people find it hard to patronize or dismiss these issues as being inconsequential or, patriarchy hurts men too. That fucking bullshit from Michael Kimmel and his lot. There is a chance now that this can actually progress to where some of these issues are being addressed. It's going to take a long time, probably 100 fucking years. But hell, we got to start somewhere. And I think we have started, and I can't take personal credit for that at all, but I can take credit for starting A Voice for Men, which has played a big role in that. There are other people too, huge influences, people, Karen Strawn, the whole Honey Badger Brigade, Allison Tiemann, Janice Fiamingo, Steve Brulé's work. All of that's adding up to a very powerful message that can't be ignored. And now we're getting ready to go to Australia next year, where we're going to have a conference in probably one of the most hostile environments you can possibly imagine. But we're going to do what we always do. We will go there peacefully. We will go there with our message. We will go there with what we have to say. And that sort of brings you up to date. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stories I could tell. I could talk about 2020. I've already done a video on that. I could talk about BuzzFeed, been there, done that. Talk about GQ magazine and they're fucking dragging a pedophile around our conference and bringing him there and then writing that there was a pedophile at the conference. I mean, all this shit is part of this story, but I'm assuming that a lot of you guys know a lot about that. And now sort of move on now to where things are going, sort of where I'm at, what I'm doing now, which is an ear for men, which I love actually doing. I do like this shit a lot more than I like A Voice for Men. I'll be really honest with you. I like this stuff a lot more than A Voice for Men. It is still sort of in your face. It's still sort of confrontational. It's addressing things in a no bullshit way. But it is, I think, finally getting to the heart of some of the issues interpersonally for men, not just politically, not just the family courts. I mean, we talk about some of that stuff here, but mainly it's about the social contract with women and about getting men unbrainwashed from this godforsaken, fucked up message that they're somehow supposed to treat women like porcelain princesses and superwoman at the same time. It's like, and I'll even quote Bernard Chapin here. Great quote from him I saw in one of his videos years ago. We asked women if they were equal or special, and they answered yes. And that's what we're living with now, and it's bullshit. And I don't think that women ought to have the choice of saying yes to anything but equal. I think special's done. Or, let's put it this way, since I'm not an autocrat, for the men who want special to be done, it's now available. All you got to do is make that happen. That's all you have to do. You just got to decide that you don't do special when it comes to women anymore, that there aren't special snowflakes, that she doesn't get to sit there as your equal at a dinner table asserting how she doesn't need a fucking man and then bat her eyes and look away at the wall paintings when the check arrives for dinner because she's not going to reach for her fucking purse. That's the world we live in now, is a bunch of women that say they're equal and act otherwise. And we live in a world of a bunch of men that accept it. Now, so who's the bigger problem here? In my book, it's the men. It is the men. And it's... and I understand it. I get it. There's a lot of pressure. There's an awful lot of pressure, guys. I mean, there's pressure from the autocratic tradcons that are saying, man up, treat a woman like a lady. There's pressure from women with pussy power to say, if you want this pussy, you're going to have to treat me like a princess, but you're going to have to pretend like I'm your equal while you do it. You'll have to sort of quietly pay the check and then act like that I carry my weight. That I have something to bring other than my vagina and a wish list to a relationship. And that's what you're expected to deal with women these days. And I'm just saying that the whole point of this deal is that it is available to men now. It's actually available to say, you know what, fuck that. Fuck all that. I ain't doing it. And you can do it by total veto power. You can tell women to fuck off in general, that you don't want anything to do with them. You can still connect with women and do it on different terms than you've ever done it before. You can even go full-blown, committed relationship if you want to. I mean, and look, I know I get a lot of flack for this, and I'm not advocating marriage, okay? I won't get married. Excuse me, let me get a drink of my iced coffee. I'm sure that's really good for me. It seems like everything I put in my mouth has a drug in it. Nicotine lozenges, fucking iced coffee. Ah, man, that's good though. So anyway, where was I? You can have what you want, but you're living in a world that wants you, one, dead as a utility to women. And as long as you're alive, you better be working your ass off to produce for them. Here's where I was. I was talking about marriage. I'm not advocating for marriage. Marriage is for idiots. And I don't say that to mean an insult to my friends that are married. I know several guys that are happily married, and I'm happy for them. I got nothing against it at all. But if I were talking to a young man today who was making a decision on whether or not to get married, I'll be damned if I would tell him it was a good idea. It's a horrible idea. You're going to wreck your life with that shit. Your odds. Just go ahead and, quit your job and take your last paycheck and go into the fucking casino with it. And there, if you want to at least have some fun before you end up broke and alone. So, no, I don't recommend marriage, but I don't swear off women either. And, that's also part of what An Ear for Men is supposed to be about, is the guys that may not want to swear off women, guys that may want to have relationships and have to negotiate this sort of bullshit minefield that is the modern gender zeitgeist that just sucks for men entirely. And I'm not saying it's all roses for women, but for Pete's sake, I mean, you can't even imagine that what women supposedly have to deal with from men in relationships. What? Oh, he leaves his shoes on the living room carpet. Oh, his fucking underwear is stained. He left the seat up on the toilet. He doesn't take out the trash when I tell him to. Versus what men tolerate from women in relationships, incessant nagging, incessant badgering, excessive exploitation. Do this for me, do that for me, do this for me. Maybe if you did more, I would love you more. That is what men have to negotiate in relationships with women. And that's a fucked up thing to have to do. But if you're going to have a relationship with a woman, you're going to have to tread that ground and learn how to do it. And a lot of guys simply won't. A lot of guys simply cave. And it's partly why we don't have a massively spreading men's movement that is taking storm and taking over the world. Because if the reasons for having a movement were what actually drove it instead of people's fears, then we would have a massive movement. Shit, feminism would have been dead 50 years ago. If it wasn't for the fear of lack of pussy and lack of love and the fear of being alone, feminism would have been crushed a long time ago. And to be honest, autocratic traditionalism would have been crushed a long time ago. All this man-up shit would not be stuff you were hearing. If men weren't afraid of losing love and losing pussy, none of this would be happening. So the only solution I can think of is for men to get past that fear. And for a lot of men, because it is so ingrained in the way we think, so deeply embedded into our identities, into everything about us, it is just fucking hard. It is just the hardest thing in the world. And anyway, that's what this is about. And I see I'm coming up close to 45 minutes here. That's for this time, that's about as far as I wanted to rant on this stuff, as much as I wanted to talk. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm going to try it for, as long as I can try it, see what kind of response there is to it. Like I said, I'm putting this one in its fullness on YouTube. I may be in the future putting excerpts from some of them if I think they're worth listening to on YouTube as well, just to remind you guys that it's there for Patreon supporters, and a way to help me, because this does, look, what I do, not making any bones about it, it consumes my life. I mean, it just absolutely consumes everything I do. If anybody thinks I'm getting rich off this shit, they're out of their minds. I'm not anywhere close to it. I don't even generate the income to pay for half of what I do. So I thought I would try this as a way to maybe give an incentive to go in and kick $1 a month in to a few more guys by producing one more product here, a once-a-week stream that I'm calling Paul's Weekly Mancast, to be distributed for Monday consumption for one and all. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, say thank you, guys. If you've made it to the end of this, I congratulate you. And by all means, give me your feedback. In future episodes of this, I'll be covering news stories and talking about other current events and not talking about myself so much. But I wanted to do this one this way to let you get to know me a little bit better, for those of you who don't know me. And that's it. Signing off now. You guys take care. It's been great. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and see you next time.